Good morning. Chapter General Principle and Isolation of Metals, which is known as also the metallurgy. Metallurgy involves the process of extraction of metals from their ores economically and profitably. Production of metals generally involves three basic steps, of which the first step is the enrichment or concentration of the ore, which is also alternatively known as benefaction. Metal extractions in the crude form is the second step, that involves first oxidations of the metal ore and their subsequent reductions, and the final steps involves purifications of the metal. Now we will discuss these three basic steps in detail. The first of which is the concentration of ores, that is enrichment. That means in that process we will remove the unwanted materials and hereby enrich the percentage of actual ore in the mining product. It involves basic steps that are related to the unwanted material being removed and its properties, the first of which is the magnetic separation. If the unwanted materials can be removed by a magnetic property, then this magnetic separation is under process. This diagram basically tells us about how to remove this unwanted material. If it is a magnetic sort of substance, there we can easily produce that ore from the earthen substance is actually passed through this conveyor belt, in which the magnetic substances are get glued to that rotating motor, where the magnetic roller separates the magnetic particles here in that vessels, and non-magnetic substance are actually separated in some other container. Froth flotation process involves the sulfide ores, in which the ore comes to the surface of the solutions being weightable, and then the unwanted materials are precipitated at the bottom. If the ore and the unwanted material, which alternatively is known as gangue, both are sulfide in nature, then we need to use certain components which will preferentially weight the unwanted substance and the minerals differentially, and the substances are known as stabilizers, and there are certain chemicals available with us which are also known as cresol and pine oil for that. Metal extraction that can be conventionally extracted by pyrometallurgy and hydrometallurgy. Pyrometallurgy basically involves the oxidation of the ore and subsequent calcination, roasting and smelting, whereas hydrometallurgy involves the leaching, dissolves ore in a suitable solvent and subsequent electrolysis. We will discuss about this part in detail, about the conventional process of pyrometallurgical process, in which large quantities of waste are produced in concentrating the low grade ores, and it requires certain amount of the energy, whereas hydrometallurgy does not require that sort of huge amount of energy. So technically hydrometallurgical process is more profitable than pyrometallurgical process. Silver, aluminium, these are generally involved in that sort of hydrological process. So this hydrometallurgy basically involves leaching, then the solution which preferentially goes into the solution in a suitable chemical, and finally the metal is recovered. Hydrometallurgy versus pyrometallurgy. This comparison clearly shows that pyrometallurgy is not environmental friendly, and it is not very much economical in comparison to hydrometallurgy, but there are some disadvantages to the hydrometallurgy, which shows large amount of water is actually used, and that leads to certain loss and some overhead to the metallurgical process. Calcination, that involves heating of the ore in absence of air much below the fusion temperature. The main aim for the calcination is to remove the volatile material, whereas roasting involves limited supply of air and heating the ore much below the fusion temperature, and the main intention is to oxidize the material. So common to both calcination and roasting is the heating the ore below the fusion temperature, but in case of calcination it is much it is also in absence of the air, but in case of roasting the limited supply of air is taken. Reduction of the ore to the oxidized metal, that depends on the position of the metal in the electrochemical series. this conventionally shows us about that, so which is the more reactive metals, these are electrolyzed, whereas the less reactive metal, these are heated with the carbon and are reduced in the carbon reduction process, whereas the unreactive metals are undergoes the self-reduction or auto-reduction process. Now the refining. The last steps of the metal extraction, in which this distillation, liquefaction, electrolysis, zone refining and chromatographic methods are used. Basically this different process involves their physical nature, low boiling point, low melting point, or that highly reactive metals, or they are suitably soluble in the unwanted substance than in the pure metal, and the respective movement of certain metals in a particular type of solvent, that actually is the principle of separating these metals in different that sort of processes. So these are the basic things that must be known for the metallurgical processes. Hope this becomes somewhat formidable importance towards this lecture. Thank you for your attention.